Hello and welcome back to Copic in the Craft Room. It's Michelle Houghton here, and this week I am coloring up this little image. These are stamps from Stamping Bella. They have a new line of stamps by Danielle Donaldson of all these little female figures, and most of them come with kind of a matching set of a taller and shorter, very similarly clothed, and look most likely kind of a mother-daughter figure or older sister, younger sister type set. All of them have these wonderful little sayings and have kind of a feeling behind them. This one is Altogether Brilliant, Find the Sunshine, or the sayings. The name of the stamp itself is Altogether Evelyn. So these are kind of our heavier stamps. The other thing that was really sweet, and I didn't even realize that these came with, is they come with a little story about these individual characters. So I love the sentiment behind these and beautiful stamps. I also love the artwork that they've done on the front. It's a very watercolor feel. And so I'm going to imitate that today. It's not going to go, I'm not actually pulling out my water brush like I've done in the past. And maybe on a second set, I will do that and do kind of more of a palette style coloring. And that would be fun on another of these because I got two sets. I couldn't decide which one. So, but I'm going to keep it very light, very low contrast. And I'm just going to color them up. There's a chance I will cut them out and put them on a card, but I haven't decided yet. You know me, kind of last minute and fly by the seat of my pants. So I'm going to do some coloring to start, keep it really light, watercolor looking, and I think we'll get going. So I'll zoom in and we will start. I'm starting with the Colorless Blender, and I'm going to use that almost in between every step, and so I'm not going to mark it every time. Next is YR31, and I'm flicking that from the base of the hair and from around the face upward. E21 is next, and that's coming from the outer edge of the hair kind of inward. Again, you're going to notice I'm using that Colorless Blender in between every step to keep these inks really, really wet. E33 was last, right along the neck and that bottom edge of the hairline. Back to YR31. Colorless Blender on that little tail end of her hair. E21 and E33 are also going on that curl, and back to Colorless Blender. Then I'm going to fill in her face in those areas of skin. So I did her hands, and later I'll come back to her legs, but for now I've got her face, her neck, and her hands. I'm using YR000 to coat that area. I left a little bit of a highlight to the front of her face. YR00 is the color I'm using to add a tiny bit of shading. Next, I'm going to move over to the smaller figure, and I start again with Colorless Blender, and then I add Y00 to her hair. YR31 is going to add the shading on her hair, but I'm keeping her particularly light. A lot of times the younger figure is going to have lighter hair. And then I go ahead and use the Colorless Blender to soften those and to go ahead and base the skin. YR000 on the face and tiny, tiny amounts of that YR00. Back to Colorless Blender, and I'm filling in the apron on the taller figure. B60 is the color I'm going to use to kind of start shading that. I am leaving some areas of white. B63 for some shading, and then I'm softening that back with the B60 and the Colorless Blender. These colors you're going to notice are even more subtle than they normally would be. Colorless Blender again on the shirt area, then YR61. Because I'm working on top of that Colorless Blender, all these colors look lighter than they would normally. Softening that more with the Colorless Blender, and then YR65 is what I'm adding just a touch of shading to the shirt with. YR61 to soften those edges, and then Colorless Blender to kind of fade out almost to white, but not quite on the shirt. Then I'm coloring in the tights with my Colorless Blender. B63 is going all the way down the left-hand edge of both legs, softening and fading to white, and then B66 is going to be every other stripe so that I can add a little bit of variation, B63 to soften those darker stripes, and of course, Colorless Blender to touch all those areas and keep them super soft. I went ahead and extended that down to the legs, and I'm adding a touch of YR000 to the legs, YR65 and Colorless Blender on the shoes as well. Then I'm moving over to the smaller person's apron, and I'm going to do this one in the YR61. Now I'm going to make a mistake on this one, and immediately I don't realize it until after I start shading the shirt, but I've confused my light source. I've got the light source on her face coming in from the right, and now I've just done the light source on her apron coming from the left. I'm working through the B60, big B63 on her shirt, and then the Colorless Blender, I realize at this stage that I've gone the wrong direction. So I softened all those areas with my Colorless Blender, and I'm coming back with the same colors, the YR61, the YR65, and Colorless Blender to shift that shading. So now it's all the same. Light source on that right-hand side. B60, B63 on the tights, and B66. Softening up with B60 again, B63 on those little shoes, and some YR00 on her legs. I'm using the Colorless Blender at this point to clean up a little bit because there's so much moisture. It does bleed out a little bit of the edges. And then I'm going to go ahead and start making the card. I'm doing some fussy cutting. These are pretty tight little images, and so I don't necessarily want to go around all those little tiny spots, specifically her ankles. Her wrist is pretty tight. That curl gets really tiny at the end. So I do get pretty close to all those areas, but I'm not going to go in and try to cut out the actual curl. What I do instead is a trick you've seen me do before, which is try to match a color of my Copic marker to the paper the figure's sitting on top of. So I used my B63 and colored in those little areas that are still showing the lighter color of the paper. And when I lay it down on the card, you're actually not going to be able to see where those paper parts are, at least unless you look extremely closely and know what you're looking for. So both all cut out, and I've added a little bit of that B63 into a couple areas just to keep it from kind of glowing white. And then I'm going to put this little card together, simple as usual, just some layers of paper and these two little figures, and then a tag kind of tucked in. So I do not have everything completely attached, but this is what my little card is looking like. I've left a little space that if I want to try to put a sentiment, I can. But otherwise, I think they're situated as usual. I'm keeping it sweet and simple. I just don't need any more than that. I didn't want to add a whole lot. I think that's pretty much it. Two kind of watercolor looking figures. And I love the personality of these stamps from Stamping Bella. It's just a fun change. I could see using them in a lot of mixed media projects, but certainly sweet for cards and scrapbooking, other crafting materials, other crafting projects as well. Thank you for joining me this week. If you have not done it yet, make sure to subscribe to our channel. If you enjoyed this, like this video, and as always, please ask questions and make some comments in that comment section. That's going to help me make sure the next videos are exactly what you need and are looking for. Lastly, if you haven't had a chance to do so, make sure to join us over at Copic in the Craft Room on Facebook. We've got a ton of inspiration for Copic and crafting. Thank you, and have a happy, colorful week.